All right. So my next step here is to get these old drum brakes off, and we can clean up the spindles, check them out, and see what we've got for like how they are, and get the disc brake kit out, and we'll start getting that on. I already did the other side, because the other side is the one that was locking up sometimes. It had a shoe in it that was kind of, I don't know, rusty. So this cap on the other side got stuck too. So sometimes you just gotta get in here and get under the lip and hammer these things out. This one's filled with water, probably from me washing it. It's kind of surprising because it's actually been a month or more since I washed it, but I guess it just sat in there, got through the hole and just kind of sat in there. It's not rusty, so that's okay. So this is a link pin front end. So doing brakes on the front of a ball joint car, so 66 and later, would be relatively the same. But what you're going to see here is this uses two nuts to hold that, two spindle nuts to hold the bearing and everything together. Where a ball joint front end will have a single nut, but it'll have an Allen bolt that pinches the two halves of the nut together. What you're gonna need to do to get this drum off is you're gonna have to back off these shoes. Let me see if I can get you in here enough. You can see, if I can get the light and the camera to work at the same time. You can see right in there is a star. That star is your adjusting star. There is gonna be, let's see if I can hold this and do this. You're gonna take either a flat screwdriver, or I have this brake tool, and you're gonna come in here and you're gonna make this adjustment. Sometimes you get it the right way, sometimes you get it the wrong way. You can usually look at, this piece I'm pointing to right here. That top piece is the cup, and I'll show you when I get the drum off, so it makes a little more sense. But what I'm doing is I'm turning this down, and you're trying to back off the shoes so that when you get these nuts off, the drum will just slide right off. And then there is a second one. I got the camera in my face, so I'm using the camera screen on the camera to actually see what I'm doing here. So kind of bear with me. This one might be all the way adjusted out already. Yep, looks like it is. All right, so let me get you back over here. All right, so we've got those stars, the shoes are backed off, and now what you've got here, and hopefully you can see it if I tilt this way, these earlier styles, I've got the wrenches here, 27 millimeter, these nuts are. There is a lock tab is what they put over these. Let me see if I can just hammer this one. All right, so that's the locking tab. See if I need the second one or if it's gonna move on me. There we go. And this should be, these always screw me up. No matter how many times I do them, they screw me up. I believe the driver's side is left-hand thread, well, clearly, and the passenger side is opposite. This is the lock plate that's in here. It's got the tab on it. It's got one to fold down when you go on. So you'd tighten that nut up. You'd get this one down here, bend this over, put the next nut on, and then bend this one out towards the nut. And it works to lock the two nuts on each other in place. And then you're gonna once you get the second nut off, you've got a washer with a tooth on it, so it only goes one way. Then inside of that, link pin cars use a different style bearing. The later 66 and later ball joint cars use what's called a tapered bearing. These use a ball bearing type. Let me see if I can pop it out of here. So here's your ball bearing. It actually has the balls going all the way around, and the races are independent of it. There is a race inside of this drum that is pressed into there, the same as you would have with a tapered bearing on a later car, pressed in. It's just this portion of it is going to look very different. And then this drum is just going to pull off because I've loosened the shoes. And inside, you're going to have another bearing, same type of thing. This thing's filthy. Parts are actually almost brand new. We did them 8 years ago, and then the car was never driven after that. But there's a lot of rust built up. So that bearing that's inside the drum, if you pull this seal, let's see if you can see this. This is a seal on the outside. If you pull that out, that bearing will pop right out of there. There is also an inner race, just like there is on the outer. And I can show you the races when I go to put this back together, because I got brand new rotors that are gonna go on. So those are gonna need the races put into them. So I will show you how to put the races in at that point. For whatever reason, this one's the same way. The other side, this inner race, so I guess the outer race to the inner bearing is pressed into the drum. This race, the opposite side, is stuck on the shaft, and it was stuck on the other side too, and I had to use some heat and everything to get it out of there. First, let me get this backing plate off so that we can get that out of the way. On this, while I have it here, I'll show you. So you've got a wheel cylinder. Yeah, let me get this. You got a wheel cylinder here. Hydraulic fluid, brake fluid comes through, goes into this wheel cylinder and pushes these two ends of the shoes apart. Pretty tight spring here. We did new hardware and everything when we did this. Pushes that apart. Here's your adjusters that I had mentioned. And if you turn these adjusters, that one's all the way in. If I turn these adjusters, you'll see this is what you're doing, but you're doing it through the drum. And all you're doing by turning this, you can see, you might be able to see it moving. I'll go as far as I can so you can really over exaggerate it. But typically when you adjust drum brakes, all you're gonna do is you're probably gonna move these 1 or 2 clicks at the most, spin it, you can feel a little bit of drag and you're good to go. But you can see how much that just moved. And what that did is that pushed this shoe out. You'd do that to both sides, and you'd put both ends of this are going to be out further towards the drum. Then when you step on the brakes, the pressure goes into the wheel cylinder, and it's basically going to equal that on both ends. And in theory, you should have both sides of this entire radius of this shoe should be touching the inside of the drum when you do that. Because you get a pivot point here, you've got this popped out as far as it's supposed to be, and it's lightly rubbing on the drum. You put pressure into the wheel cylinder, and the whole thing's gonna put pressure against the drum, and that's just how drum brakes work. All right, let me get this off here. And that's it. And then your backing plate's off. So here's your spindle. I've got to clean this whole thing up. I've got to get this race off here. Let me reset, and I will bring you back, and I'll show you how I got the race off the other side. So the other side was stuck too, and I'm not really sure why these are stuck. I don't remember. I did the brake job on this 8 years ago. And I don't, oh, this one's not stuck. Okay, I'm sorry. So the other side, this inner race was really stuck on there, and I ended up having to heat it up and get it off. And there is, I'll show you when I'm done here, There is a very slight ridge. This has a nick in it. You can probably see in the camera. And then there is a slight ridge here that this was just, it was just frozen onto. And what I ended up doing is this was stuck. I wish I had shown you the other side now. I used a 2-arm puller. I heated this up and I was able to twist it out just far enough that I could actually get this puller back there. And once the puller was back behind here, it was a real easy, you know, just tighten this up and it pulled it off. And then let's get a look at this spindle. I think it's just this notch. I don't know what the hell happened to this thing at some point in time, but there's a notch there and a notch there. I don't know if that's going to show up on the camera. See if I can get a light directly on it. That's probably worse. But I'll take some emery cloth and smooth those out before anything goes back on here. I'll clean up this whole spindle. All right, so here's all the parts to this kit I'm going to install. We got brackets. This is a link pin front end, so brackets are a little funnier looking than, you know, what the ball joint ones look like. I just hit them with some spray paint just to give them some kind of protection. We got the calipers all loaded back up. We got these brake rotors that are drilled out for GM and a Ford bolt pattern. Because this is going on a Dune Buggy, I'm using a GM bolt pattern wheel, so that's why I got those rotors. I hit these with some, it's this Rust-Oleum high heat ceramic something or other spray paint, just to kind of give them a little bit of protection. I did not, I know it looks like I spray painted the entire pad surface. I didn't. There's a little bit of mist on it. It won't hurt anything. The first time you step on the brakes, it'll wear off. This coating seems to be pretty thin, so it'll wear off the area that the pad rides on. But I really just wanted to get all this area protected. It includes the inner and outer bearings. If you're doing link pin, these bearings are a little different than what came off the car. These are a tapered roller bearing. And we'll get them greased up and everything. Can probably show you. All right, so here's one of the bearings out. So this is a tapered bearing opposed to the ball bearings we pulled off the car. It's a cone. Uses a race that also has a cone to it. That's the kind of the difference between a ball bearing and a tapered bearing, tapered roller bearing. Comes with the seals, comes with dust caps. I still got to clean the sticky stuff off. It did come with some bolts for the, I believe these are for the caliper to bracket. You reuse your backing plate bolts. You reuse those to attach the brackets. And then it gave me these 2 shims, just a thin shim with some instructions that basically are telling me that I need to put this shim into the rear before the rear race, install the rear race, put the whole thing on the car. And if I get to the point that the caliper is touching the rotor without the brake being applied, then these need to come out. Kind of an odd thing, you know, to ask of people, I guess, but that's what this little sheet that came in it says. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to install these first, and if I have to pull them, I'll pull them. Hopefully I don't have to, but I don't really understand what the why there's a difference, but maybe on a link pin spindle there are earlier ones versus later ones. It's not something I know of, but that could be the case, and maybe that's the difference of where it sits in there. So, all right. So I'll next, I think we'll get these races hammered in. It's real simple. I'll show you that. All right. So to throw these races in, I'm going to start on this one on the back side, and this, like I mentioned, this particular kit calls for a spacer to be put in there. So this spacer gets dropped into here. Seems to fit relatively easy and everything. So we'll drop that in there. I'm going to throw a little bit of grease in here just to help the race slide in. You can do this with a press. You can do this the way I'm going to do it right now with a bearing cup seal driver. So here's your race. I'm going to get this started in the hole, and I'm just going to try to get it as even as I can, just lightly tapping it. And I'm a little bit crooked, but it should straighten out. And what I've got is this bearing cup. This is a pretty cheap set, and it says it's a 50 millimeter, but I already did the other side, and I found that this is pretty loose in here, and it's the closest one I got. So I think I'm probably going to look for a better set for the next time I have to do this, just so I don't have to deal with this not being as tight as I'd like it to be. So I'm a little high on this side. So what I'm going to do is, as I hammer this in, I'm going to hit the top of this with a hammer. I'm going to tilt it just slightly this way to put a little bit more pressure on there. And you'll see that I'm going to lift it off. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to check it. And I'm going to keep doing that several times. So here we go. All right, so at this point, I've got this flat, and I've got it pretty level in there. And that's the big thing, is driving it in straight. You don't want to drive it in at an angle. You don't want that. So that's why I kind of walked around it a little bit just to get that flat. And now, if you can see in here, hopefully you can see there's a gap down at the bottom here. Let me see, get this. There's a gap right down in there between, you can see the spacers still able to move, and you can see this bottom of the race. What you want to do is you want to drive this down until this entire race is sitting completely flat on the lip at the bottom of this rotor where that spacer is sitting. So let me hammer that in there, and you'll hear the sound of it change as it hits the bottom. Okay, and that's it. That's driving a race in there. And you see the bottom, there's still a little bit of a slot there, but I can't move that spacer. So actually the spacer being in there is kind of nice, because it was able to show a little better how it goes in, because the spacer is still there, so we can see if there's any movement. But hopefully this kit fits fine and that spacer doesn't have to come out. But we'll see how that goes. That's a separate thing. But you could hear the sound go from, I don't know, I guess the hammering, the thud, got the pitch changed as this race seated all the way to the bottom. You could hear that pitch change. And that's it. That's all there is to driving a race in. It's going to be the exact same thing for the other side. It's just a smaller one. All right, so with the races pressed in, our next step here is to get this rear bearing in. I'm going to load this up with some grease. And I've already taken my rear bearing and packed it with grease. I use this handy packer. They're a pretty simple tool. Basically what you do is you lay the bearing down inside of here. You put the plunger in on top and you push down on that. And then that grease is all going to pack through here. And then you kind of, rub the grease all the way through and everything, and then you're all set. That's really all there is. It's a pretty messy job, but it's requirement of doing bearings, so you got to get the grease in there so that it'll hold up until you do the next service. All right, so with that in place, I'm going to go one more time, some grease around the edge just to help the seal get in. This is the seal. You've got a flat edge. The seal sits in this way, so the flat edge is up on the upper side, stopping it from going any further than it is. Just give it one more swipe here. Probably not necessary because there's already grease in there, but it's all right. And then this particular kit, the seals seem to go in pretty easy. I've already done the other side. Brakes are all installed on the other side. I left this side to film. And you can use a race seal tool like I used to put the races in. You can use that and use the flat side and hammer this in flat. But if you look at this bearing's right up against the edge pretty much, just apparently the way this kit works. So it's really not necessary. The seal's just pretty much barely in there, and then I've got my outer seal, or outer bearing rather, sitting here too. All right, so let's bring this all over. I got to get the bracket on and get this rotor installed. Okay, so I've got this spindle all cleaned up. It had some burrs in it, both on the spindle itself and on the seal surface. This surface back here is where the seal rides on. I ended up using some fine sandpaper and just kind of flossing it all the way around just to rub the burrs down basically and get this cleaned up. Pretty simple. It happens, happens often with an old spindle like this. So the next step to getting this disc brake kit on is to get these caliper brackets on. These caliper brackets seem to be made for left and right. They're exactly the same, both of them. They have extra holes in them. So the way this ends up going on, and I tried it a few different positions because none of this was in any directions I had. But the best way I found that they fit properly was with this kind of angled down. They do kind of angle a little lower than most ball joint kits do. Again, this is a link pin front end. But I don't think it's going to cause any kind of problem at all. It's tucked out of the way, and it'll put the brake caliper kind of in line with where the hose is supposed to be. So, oops, sorry. So that'll I think that's a better option than putting the caliper towards the front or anything. So we'll get this snugged up. You reuse the old bolts. And I don't have a tie rod on this spindle, so everything kind of moves around a little more than you'd have it when this is a complete car. All right, so that's good and tight. Next step here, I'm going to throw some grease on the spindle. These kits go together pretty quick. It's a lot of grease. Get some of that off there. Throw some grease on here, especially the seal surface. The rest of it just kind of helps it get on there. The bearings have been greased, so this is just to help it slide on easier. Because they'll hang up sometimes, but get some grease in there. It's my front bearing. All right. So then all we're doing is sliding this on, get it to seat all the way back, and then I'm going to let it hang for a second while I pop some more grease in the front of this, just to really make sure everything's greased up well. And then your front bearing, will just sit right inside, and it should slide in all the way. Sometimes they get kind of hung up. There it goes. And that's all the way in there. Next piece, you've got this washer with the tooth on it, and you've got a slot in the spindle. That'll sit right inside there. And then we have the two nuts. And don't forget, this is left-hand thread. This one started on here. Okay, so at this point, that's not going to fall off there. Obviously, this is because there's no tie rod. Like I said, this is able to turn way further back than it should be able to. It should probably stop somewhere in there, but it actually works out for filming it, and I have tie rods to put on in a minute. All right, so now we got to set our bearing preload. And I always end up going the wrong way on these. Left side, left-hand thread. And again, I've done this before in other videos. I can't tell you exactly how tight to make this. You kind of get a feel for it. The other thing with link pin style front ends is you've got these two nuts. So somewhere in here, you've got to be able to get this washer in. The washer, I'm reusing this because I couldn't find a new set, but this washer has the one leg's bent back already, and it has the tab in here that slides into the slot. So you get this in. Sometimes they can be a little tricky getting that tab to slide in there. You may have to bend it a little bit. But you really, because of the shape of this and because of the tab, you really only got one position that this nut can really be. Now, if that's wrong, you can kind of bend this tab over at an angle and just catch the edge of the nut wherever you need to. But typically it's somewhat right. And this feels pretty good. So I'm going to run with that. And then your next nut just goes on top of it. Sometimes these nuts, and this doesn't seem to, sometimes they have more of a flat side on one side and it's, a little bit more of a crown on the opposite side. This particular set of these are original Volkswagen ones and they don't seem to, but always good to kind of check that. Obviously you'd want a flat one on a flat side. So get this tightened down. And all this is, you're trying to stop. I have these two 27mm wrenches. They're actually designed for this job. I don't know if you can see the numbers on them, but these aren't Volkswagen ones. These are Mac Tool ones. I've had them a long time. I think I got them at a swap meet at some point. But they're designed to have a straight one there. This one gives you, it's got a little bit of a bend to it so that you can get in here. But this is really the best way to do this. You could do it with, if you've got a flat enough wrench to hold that one, and then you could do this with a socket or another wrench. But this is a super easy way to do it. But all you're trying to do is hold the back one, tighten the front one so that you're not moving the back one around, and get it into a spot where it's tight. It's tight and you're able to still bend the tab over. Let me just loosen that back up. I probably went a little too far on that. Nope, I guess that's where it needs to be. So here's an example here. Like this tab's going to bend over nice onto that back one straight in there. And the front one's going to have to be bent over at an angle. That's not a big deal. as long as I like to get everything together first before I start bending those over, and just kind of make sure everything lines up and everything works right before you get to the point that you're hammering this tab out. So I'm going to let that sit, and then we're going to work on getting this caliper on here. Yeah, you'd be able to see it from this side. I did the other side, and I had a little bit of variation here. I wanted to get this done. I wanted to get the other side done off camera so that in case I needed to pull the race apart. When I installed the races, I had mentioned that there is a spacer that they tell you to put in that you may or may not need, and they can't tell you that whether you need it or not until, you know, you won't know until this caliper rubs on the rotor. So in this case, luckily, I don't have to pull the spacers back out because they seem to fit. This seems to be the right direction. I have had these calipers, and I had it on the other side, where I had to put a very small washer between the caliper and the bracket on one side. I don't know if the bracket's bent, the spindle maybe have a little bit of a warp to it, whatever it is. It just didn't want to sit totally flat. It also could be the casting of the caliper might be slightly off. I looked at that, and it just seemed that was my best course of action. We'll see how this one goes. You're going to get some rub from brake pads being in there, and there's no pressure obviously in this caliper, so you are going to have some kind of drag on it because the pads are till the pads seat. All right, let's get that in there. And this one actually feels pretty good. The other side, I think, just kind of had a little bit of a spot in there. All that noises that you can hear is just the brake pads kind of dragging on that rotor just a hair. But that's pretty much it. I'm going to bend this tab down, and then I'm going to get the dust caps on, and that will finish up this disc brake kit. And we'll move on to, I guess, getting these tie rods and everything on. So we're going to throw these new tie rods on. I was going to reuse the old ones. I found two of the boots had rips in them. The joints felt fine. I had some boots here, but I started looking at them. I'm going to have to do an alignment on this, and everything just seemed kind of rusted up to a point that it just didn't make sense. So anyway, we got these new ones. The way these are going to go on, they're pretty simple. Literally just drop in on either side. Oddly enough, this side has a castle nut. This side has a nylock nut on the long tie rod. The short one had nylock nuts on both. Kind of odd, but that's all right. So the way I like to do these, just so that everything's even, I like to make sure that these are threaded in as tight as you can get them within reason. Like, you know, both of them are in. Obviously that's sitting at an angle, so it'll have to be slightly straightened out. And the reason for that is as you twist this rod, it's gonna send both of these tie rods out. So when I do an alignment, I want them to both be moving out at equal lengths. I don't want one of them to the point where it's you know, if this was further out, if I had this further out on the tie rod, and then I extend these, this one's going further out on the threads than I'd like it to compared to the opposite side. So if you can just start with everything as tight and far up as you can get it, it just makes for an easier time of not having a tie rod get too close to the end. Probably a little safer too, whatever. So pretty simple. Tie rod goes in on either side, get them straight. Sometimes the joints can be kind of tight. Nylock nut over here. These are all 17 millimeter. I'm not sure if that's what the factory one was or not, but that's what these are. So get this thing started if I can see it. Castle nut on this side for whatever reason. That one up there. Let me just tighten this side up. try a different nut. That one is going on, yeah, this one's much better. It's either some dirt in that one or something's wrong with it. Should thread on mostly by hand until you hit the nylock part, and then obviously you're gonna have to use a wrench, but that's on there good and tight, and this side's just needs to be tightened up enough so that I can get the pin through a spot. All right, and what I was kind of mentioning with the alignment is, now that you can see this, if I give this rod a twist, you'll see that both sides move out, and you're unthreading both sides at the exact same time. And if you had been, you know, halfway on this thread, all the way on this thread, and then you try to adjust that, what's going to end up happening is one side's going to pop out, or you're going to get just too close to the end. Once I get the other side on, I'll eyeball this and just get it as close as I can. Same thing on this one. Little different setup. This one, the jam nut just backs down and jams tight against this. This side has a slot cut all the way around, multiple slots going around this, and it has this collar that will jam onto there and kind of pinch this at the same time. So same deal, get this, get these on here as far as I can get them. Just a little bit of garbage in here. Okay, to get a rough alignment on here, just because you can see that when these are, when I try to straighten them, and I've already turned them out some, you can see that this is clearly, the toe is way out in the front. So what I like to try to do is I want to try to find the center of the steering. So I've taken some nail polish, made a dot on the top of the steering shaft, and then you can kind of count, I'm not sure how many revolutions this is, but you can count through, there's 1, 2, 3, we're just barely over 3. So let's say 1.5 is going to be the center. So we'll come back, 1, and then if I put this straight down, if I can see where my dot is, that should be the center right there. So if I look at that, obviously these are still terrible. So now I'm going to twist this out. And this is why I say, you know, pay attention to when you start where this is, because you see how much I have to thread that out to get this, and I probably went a little too far. If I just look at the flat of the drum, I'm just trying to get straight right now. But you can see where that goes and how far that is out. And if I had had this halfway out, I may have popped the tie rod out already. I'm guessing it's probably somewhere around that long. So you probably got an inch of threads or so roughly left back in there. So what I'm going to do right now, just to, this is roughly straighted. Obviously it's going to need alignment, but I'm just going to walk the nuts down and kind of just by hand put them in so that they're in somewhat of a position where they, you know, it'll maintain somewhat straight. This one's still a little off here. I can come back some. All right. And we can get into alignments later on in the build, but I generally do them right on the floor here, but I can walk you through that. Next piece that's missing here, excuse me getting in the way, just grab this hardware, is the steering stabilizer. Steering stabilizer, it's basically like a shock. Keeps everything from moving at kind of a slower rate. Without a steering stabilizer, sometimes you'll get, I don't know what the technical term is for it at the moment. I can't think of it, but you like a death wobble where basically you'll hit a bump and your steering wheel will just kind of go crazy. It'll just go back and forth. Sometimes at high speed, it'll start doing that. You'll get kind of it's a little bit scary. So car manufacturers began putting steering stabilizers on cars for that purpose to kind of reduce that. So like a shock, like I said, you've got a stud on this side, you've got a hole on this side with a bushing in it. Go through the tie rod here. I've got a washer and a nut that's going to go on this end. I saved the hardware from the old one because this one didn't come with any, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Usually you at least get the nut. The bolt you don't generally ever get, but it is what it is. That's how stuff is. So, all right, put that on there. These are just, again, 17 millimeter. See if I can tighten this without knocking this thing off the jack stand. All right, and that's it. And you'll see, well, you can't see it, but I can feel it. The difference between with it and without it is a lot. You can actually feel the difference in how much effort it takes to spin this. And basically what that is it's just slowing down your steering enough so that things kind of maintain. You hit a bump, the wheel doesn't jerk one direction or the other. But that's it. That's tie rods, steering stabilizer. We got our brakes on. I've got to run brake hoses and all the lines, but I need shocks too. But that's all probably another day for those. I'll probably do a video of just running the brake lines because it's going to be a little bit time consuming. So to get them clean anyway. I think my next step, yeah, that's it. All right, thanks for watching.